I'm Jhave for Versopolis, February 2025. This is the DIY AI poetry tutorial. The first principle we're going to establish is that AI is not poetry. It does not have heart. So who am I? Better to ask, what am I? I am an implementation of universal energy, as are you. I'm also temporarily joyfully employed as an AI narrative researcher at the Center for Digital Narrative in Bergen. In 2010, my PhD thesis was written. In 2016, it became a book where I predicted that AI systems would write verse, as they have been doing for decades. But then eventually that they would begin to freestyle, and eventually bots will feed bots. And we've arrived at that point. Now, during this talk, I'd like to offer a disclaimer. The views expressed by the following algorithms do not necessarily reflect the views of the artist, nor the aesthetics of the artist, the principles, the intentions, the thoughts, the ideas, the dreams, the visions, etc. Now, in 2017, 2018, I made a project called Rewrites. It resulted in a 12-volume, custom-bound, limited edition, Human plus AI poetry box set. Single author, single year. Over 4,500 poems were created in 1 year. I assembled a custom data source of 600,000 lines of poetry, fed that into TensorFlow and PyTorch beta libraries, and then constructed my own neural networks, which were capable of generating extremely fast, incomprehensible videos of poetry that were nonsensical for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of that. So AI has that kind of sense. After a little while, it's like an avalanche that becomes a mountain, and that massive presence of generated text can exude the kind of overwhelming capacity. 6 to 8 a.m. for 1 year, I rose and edited machine-generated poems. And what I did basically was I cut away what I did not want. And I called that act of meditative editing carving. And I invite you as thinkers, writers, poets, to consider that as a way to augment your creativity and also invite the algorithm into a relationship with your own innate capacities. Mind is hammer, carve. Now today we're going to do something maybe more irreverent or irrelevant. Today we will write and then animate this poem using free, sort of free, online AI. The tools are free in a sense that many of them will offer a little taster, a tiny morsel to try them out. And there's a diverse variety of them. We're going to look specifically at many of them, and I'm also going to recommend that you just treat them like a ephemeral debris in a stream. They're passing by. You're going to have to modulate your practice over time and adapt. We're going to focus on animated typography. This presentation does not focus on animal typography. Animal typography is dangerous in a world full of cars and carnivores. The creative process, as in the creative AI process, is often frustrating. Things don't go exactly as planned. My advice is accept, absorb, assimilate. Writing has always been messy, embodied. It's not antiseptic, nor is it often bureaucratic. But in order to get access to Claude, which is a great writing assistant, you will need to give your phone number, which is so that their service does not become overwhelmed by bots. After that, you will see a very traditional prompt window. I suggest you paste in some of your poems. And then from there, you iterate and you refine and you convert what it produces into something that fits your vision. So once that vision has somewhat been established in writing, we will move to a prelude of what we could eventually create, some sort of static dream born from the digital ghost, some place where the static dreams are born from the birthing frames of different styles. To remember that while neural nets weave uncanny valleys and pixel-thin realities, image generation remains a writing act. So begin with a good prompt. Think of the prompt as poetry scrawled in an open notebook, bent and creased, with a doodle of letters and birds on a table illuminated by sun beside a ceramic bowl full of plums. And since humans are only kind of good at prompt engineering, then you can also use the chatbots as assistants. Val AI, let's let's return to how do you begin to make an image. Now, this is a paid platform, but the reason I'm going to suggest you use it first, or try it out at least, is that it has a model with excellent typographic adherence. So if you're a writer, you want the language to be correctly spelled, you want the letter forms to be discrete, kerning to be respected, all of these basic typographic notions. And FAL AI has numerous models, and Ideogram V2 is excellent at prompt adherence that involves typography. For instance, on the same day that I made that previous slide, Adobe released their own AI video generation engine for free. So I went to try it out, and I put the same prompt into there and smeared that with a melting rainbow goo splash, and found that the text didn't really coherently follow the spelling conventions of normal English. In fact, if you upload an image that has previously been created, you are ultimately going to get a much more accurate depiction of language. After 2 videos, Adobe is asking for money. I recommend you don't give them any right now, and you go try other tools. One of these tools you could try for image generation that does have a free plan every day is Recraft. Recraft has a very innovative online browser-based interface. There's many good tutorials that are inside the interface that you can use. You can start projects inside there. And an interesting aspect of this interface is you can do a prompt, and you are prompting what they call a frame. And inside the frame, you can put an image and a morsel of text. And then with your prompt, you are now prompting the image to expand around and fill the frame, and the text to be graphically designed in some sort of style that you can designate. For instance, here I put this text and that image into that frame, hit a prompt that said something about neon lights, and ended up with this small video. Now, video generation, on the other hand, can often be wordless. And as someone pointed out to me after I first gave this talk, image generation can also be wordless. But I'm going to come back to the point that image generation is a writing act, but for video generation, your first principle could be begin with a good image. So you go to an image generator, and then you have something physical that the video generator can recognize, and you don't even need a prompt. Now, I was going to recommend that you use Hyper, but in fact, they shut down while I was making this video. So I switched over to Kling. Kling offers a free trial package, and it has all of the similar features that you would find in many of these engines are replicated across the industry. You can put in a first or a last frame. You can add elements. You can do basic effects. But the formal thing to recognize is don't cling to anything. All of it's ephemeral. This is a flood of water. Now, if you want immersive audio effects to go along with your video, and you don't want to build those, you don't want to design audio, you can go to this mmaudio.net. And there's other tools that do similar things, and you will find them. And it offers you 1 free video upload per day. You upload a video, you prompt it for some sort of sound like birds, slurpy melt, then splash. You give it a negative prompt which says, I don't want music, I don't want speech, I don't want words, and you will arrive at some sort of video with semi-synchronized sound. In this case, I wanted splat, swoosh, streak, and got, wait, it gets worse. This shit is accelerating. The models are getting better at emulating the passage of the camera, the little dry, brittle sound of leaves. But this is not the pastoral farm sounds that we're used to. Those are yesterday's miracles. The Industrial Revolution, the printing press. Now we have to worry about the alignment of large language models. And honestly, I have no idea. To be candid, I don't know how to align anything. Humans haven't aligned themselves very well. Nonetheless, let's have a brief look at the costs, the economic costs, the social, the ecological costs. So for you as a consumer, if you were to use the Ideogram V2 model, how much will it cost you if you go inside FAL and you want to test out your language work? Then you can produce about 13 images for $1 US. So over the course of this presentation, I will have used about $10 US to produce and prompt a bunch of images. Often I would use Claude to enhance the ideas. So in this case, I wanted text that said social, ethical, harm, bias, and in smaller type, complex, nuanced issues outside the scope of this video. Claude came up with a huge long prompt. Far too vast, far too large. It complicated things. It made things incomprehensible. So the best motto often, as in poetry, is to keep it simple. Go back to the old yippie slogan, property is theft. And remember that Meta illegally downloaded 80 terabytes of books from all of these pirate libraries, and as did all of the big corporations as well. There is this strange moment in human history where there's a reconsideration of what constitutes ownership in the creative domains, and as usual, it's just pillaging and craziness. Because humanity is a biofilm of proteins on a tiny, tender exoplanet, has a tendency to enter into relationships that involve a lot of errors. And ethics has been reduced to the act of censoring your speech so that you do not utter profanities in your prompts. For example, guess why this prompt inside Recraft is considered profanity? Breeding. So a vague reference to sex and the censorship robots awaken. And we have to use the word bread instead of breeding. So we are making bread, not babies. Guess why this prompt is considered profanity? Because we were going to feed it corpses. Instead, we have to feed it sanitized carpses, fish. So if sex and death are censored, can we use AI for poetry? My sense is yes. But when I put that image inside Kling, it told me process failed, try again, change prompt. Even though there was no prompt, there was just an image. It had read the slide. It did not like the words sex and death. Nonetheless, I say yes. Maybe on the planet Mars, there will be ethical humans that in some propaganda colonizing Mars narrative where we ride in a porta potty for billions of kilometers, we will arrive at a place where videos can be made about poop. Because right now, Runway will not make a video out of that image. And Sora, which comes free with a ChatGPT Plus subscription, will not make a video because it will not make video that contains people. So each platform will have its own boundaries, like civilizations, ideologies, personalities. Nonetheless, I think AI is fine for poetry, and so you should just use it to make FFP things all the way. And as you're doing that, your ecological impact might climb. And some people might say this is a climate catastrophe. AI data center capacity is going to cross 10 gigawatts by early 2025. This is from Dylan Patel's semi-analysis. It's very rigorous data. But you can see here that crypto is a huge slice of the carbon impact of computation. And even in 2022, we know that the military is equal to what the crypto will be in 2026. So I believe that there is an ethical way to use AI, and I call that whole AI use, which means that you accept the Gen AI as a valid co-creator. You throw away almost nothing. Because if we are going to evade the burning oceanic waves of anthropogenic climate change which are rising to heat our cities, it is because of kids, cars, carnivores, cats, catching a flight, having a swimming pool. But it is not coming from 20,000 queries to ChatGPT per year. There is an authenticity problem that might arise. Because expecting art from arithmetic that is kind of like expecting a genius child to exist in a cloud or an algorithm to mourn its own existence. This may seem like it's a funeral for your authenticity. You may say, this is not me. I'm drowning under a deluge of AI-generated imagery. This is not my solar punk utopian life that I dreamed of. Today's technical debt that every time I click generate and reach into the swimming pool or aquarium of data, I make another morsel of AI slop that falls into the gutter of civilization, and something dies. and the wraparound topological boundary of our distributed surrender to the algorithm of infinite beauty, we are lost in that process of chasing that one raindrop. So this is our first finale, and there'll be a couple of them. Can you conceive of contemplative meaning transmitted on screen? And can you accept the glitches, aberrations, flaws, defects? Is this the end of poetry, or is it the birth of another form? Let's wrap up. To reiterate, AI is not poetry. The algorithms do not necessarily reflect the views of the artist, the aesthetic. And no material that has not been harvesting flowers, no blood can read it, nothing. So maybe we are endangered and abused as artists. Maybe that's been the role and position of poets, marginalized on the periphery of civilization forever. But right now there's the potential with these new algorithmic tools to begin to make things that have never been seen before. Today we did something vaguely irreverent or irrelevant. We looked at the messy, embodied act of writing that now is augmented with algorithms, even as it sits by the fire of the passions. And we acknowledge that writing has changed over millennia, just as everything changes. Nothing changes. Can we trust the AI? I believe we can trust the metamorphic principle of the universe. And the key point to remember is that image generation is a writing act. Writing remains important. The language skills that we have that begin with the image inside the tender flame of our gut there, down in the depths that melt all certainty into the imagination of something sinuous approaching beingness that we can craft and then recraft. Prompts are poems, and prompts are popians. I don't know what popians means, but it just appeared, so we keep it. Because poems are unpredictable, they are wet like fluids, and nothing is perfect. If we are to create a poetry as intimate as the infinite, then we must acknowledge that video generation is often wordless, that we are immersed, we are underwater in the age of AI. We will need audio to make the breath of the hollow ribs conform to this new technology as we align it so it fits with the candid notions of sex and death that do not necessarily need to be censored. We need to begin again. We need to prompt humanity so that it knows AI is fine for poetry, and that the finale, just as the recursion within a poem can be repeated over and over, even when it seems inauthentic, to know that this is not writing, this is not a typewriter, this is not a fountain pen, this is not a desk. We can relax through the thermonuclear apocalypse. Even as the internet used to belong to everyone, we know it belongs to the energy of capital, and we are all cats photographing cats, fighting over who is causing the ecological costs of property being theft, and not entering into an ethical, engaged compassion, which is the way to heal by focusing on animated typography with free or sort of free tools like DaVinci Resolve, which is where we cut together this video using free credits from other software services in order to create a contemplative, poetic AI that is not a paradox, and to acknowledge that AI is an opportunity to collaborate with the totality of our species culture, filtered through algorithms. Thank you for your patience and attention and poetic calibration. Thank you for your acceptance. Thank you for absorbing the flaws. Thank you for assimilating the strange, deviant glitches. This is the DIY AI poetry tutorial for Versopolis by Jhave in February 2025 that will be mostly relevant within minutes at the Center for Digital Narrative in Bergen.